Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I am so excited because we are doing a challenge video. I asked 7 of my really good booktube buddies what is one book that they would pick for me that they think I would love the most out of any other book that they've read. Pick one book, and they could only recommend one book to me. So I have 7 books from 7 booktube friends that I'm going to be reading for this video, and we are going to see which one of them knows me the best and makes the best recommendations. So the 7 booktube friends that have recommended me books include Jess from Jess Owens, Jashana, Jade from Bedtime Bookworm, Alex Nieves, Alan from the Library of Alexandria, Elle from Elliot Brooks, and Leanna from Leanna's Library. So now let's see which books each of those different booktubers recommended me. Jess recommended Theft of Swords by Michael J. Sullivan. I've heard amazing things. This has been on my shelf for a really long time, so when she recommended this one, I was really excited for it. I've heard that the friendship in this book is really what makes it so special, so I'm looking forward to this one. Jashana recommended me Age of Myth by Michael J. Sullivan. So we've got 2 Michael J. Sullivan books for this video, which cracked me up, but she thinks that I'm really gonna love this. This, if I understand it correctly, is set in the same world as Theft of Swords and the whole Rhaeria Chronicles and Revelations, but this is a prequel series that takes place thousands of years prior to the events that we're following in Theft of Swords. Alan from the Library of Alexandria, he recommended me Guns of the Dawn by Adrian Tchaikovsky. So this one caught me off guard. I was not expecting him to recommend me this one. I thought he would recommend Senlin Ascends or The Traitor's Blade, but alas, he recommended me Guns of the Dawn. I know that he also made Leanna read this book for a challenge that they were doing, and Leanna really enjoyed this one. So that has me very intrigued that both of them really enjoyed this. Jade from Bedtime Bookworm, she went with a non-fantasy pick. Jade recommended me The Book Thief by Marcus Suzak, which has been on my TBR for years now. Everyone seems to love this book. I know that it's historical fiction. I think it takes place around World War II. I'm a little bit nervous for this one because I don't want to have my heart ripped out of my body, but I think I'm going to really enjoy it. Anna recommended me The Lies of Locke Lamora by Scott Lynch, another one I've had on my TBR to check out for so long now. This is, I feel like, one of those quintessential fantasy series that everyone says you need to read. It's always on like the best fantasy series of all time lists. Everyone seems to love this series. And Elle recommended me The Bone Shard Daughter by Andrea Stewart. Hearing her talk about it has really sold me because it has some of those keywords that I look for when I'm looking for fantasy recommendations. Things like unique world building and cool magic systems and animal companions. Like those 3 things I love. So I'm very curious about this one. And then finally, last but certainly not least, we have Alex's recommendation, and that is Empire of Silence by Christopher Rocchio, something like that. He loves this series. I know that this is a recent read for him, and I think he was buddy reading this with Leanna, and they both love this series and have gotten me so excited to check it out. I think that this is more sci-fi, but I think it leans into sci-fantasy. Okay, so those are the 7 books that I'll be reading for this challenge. I'm really excited about all of them. To be honest, I think all of them are going to be at least 4-star reads for me. Fingers crossed that that's the case. But I thought it would be fun to predict the ranking in which I'll put them at the end and see how accurate I was when I finish reading all of them. So if I were to predict which book I'm going to enjoy the least out of these, I'm not gonna lie, it's really hard. I think I'm gonna enjoy all of them. I think in the 7th place spot, I don't know why, I think Lies of Locke Lamora is gonna take 7th place. I'm so sorry, Leanna. I have a feel, like, I've heard amazing things, right? I know that this is like classic, like you gotta read it if you're a fantasy fan. But for some reason, I just have a feeling that all that hype has like built my expectations so high, and it's not going to live up to them. I'm so nervous. In the 6th place spot, I think I'm gonna say Age of Myth, I don't have good reasons why. I don't know. I feel like this one is going to be like that. It's going to feel like that classic fantasy series that we all love. But with some of these other books, I think that they're going to have like standout characters or like cool world build or something. I don't know. I don't have good reasons for these rankings. For some reason, I think Age of Myth is going to take 6th place. In 5th, I think I'm going to say Empire of Silence. And you're going to ask me why, and I'm going to say, I don't know. I think that this one's also going to be a little bit denser than my personal preference, but I do like sci fantasy. Like, I like the idea of that, and it has a cool premise. I think the main character is this like bad guy who's not really a bad guy, but he's kind of known as this villain. I like those types of characters that are very like morally gray. So I have a feeling I'm gonna enjoy this one a little bit more than like the other two, but I still don't think it's gonna be like the best of all of them. But I could be so wrong. In 4th place, I think I'm gonna go with The Book Thief. I think it's gonna be beautiful. Don't get me wrong. I think I'm gonna love like the story, but I don't know. Historical fiction usually isn't like my all-time favorites. I have one in mind that I loved so much, The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna. But since then, I have never loved a historical fiction like that. So for that reason, I just don't know if it's going to beat out some of these other fantasy series that I think I'm gonna love. So I'm gonna say The Book Thief for 4th place. In 3rd, I think I'm gonna go with Guns of the Dawn. I feel like a broken record, but I don't know why. I think with it being a standalone, I love the fact that it's a standalone, don't get me wrong, but I always, with standalone fantasies, feel like I want more. Like, that's how I felt with Warbreaker by Brandon Sanderson. Like, I love that book so much. It is one of my favorites. So this is like a bad example because that one is like 5 out of 5. I love it so much. I always want more. So I feel like Guns of the Dawn, like, it could be amazing, but if I end it wanting more, I think that other books would beat it out in terms of being like my favorite. So I'm gonna say Guns of the Dawn for 3rd. 2nd, this is so hard. I think I'm gonna go with The Bone Shard Daughter. I think I'm gonna love The Bone Shard Daughter based on the buzzwords that people use to describe it. And like, some people have said that there's horror elements. I love that stuff in fantasy, especially. I feel like I'm gonna love The Bone Shard Daughter, but the only reason I'm not putting it at first is because I think I'm gonna love Theft of Swords even more. I think this is gonna be so interesting to see how my predictions line up with the final ranking, because Theft of Swords by Michael J. Sullivan, it is pitched as just like a fun time. Everyone seems to love it. The world is kind of the same as Age of Myth, where I think I'm gonna like the world that's being built up with these characters, and fun main characters is like, I love a good like friendship and just following a fun adventure with main character. I don't know. So many people love Theft of Swords, and that's kind of the only reason I'm putting it at first. I recently saw Monet over at Life is Monet talking about Theft of Swords, and she immediately put like Michael J. Sullivan into her auto by authors. She loves those books so much. Like, she has me so excited just whenever she describes it. It's like with such passion. She loves Theft of Swords so much. So I don't know. I just have a feeling that I'm gonna love Theft of Swords. So that is my prediction of the ranking. And we're gonna see which Booktube buddy had the best recommendation for me and will win this challenge. Let's get started. So I just finished Theft of Swords by Michael J. Sullivan. I finished both The Crown Conspiracy and Avanpartha, which are the first 2 books in this series that are both in this bind-up. I loved them. I loved them both. I'm so excited about this series and about getting into Michael J. Sullivan's writing. I will say they weren't 5 stars, so they were 4.5, which is still like, I loved it. There was a couple things that brought it down, that 0.5 star. that I'll chat about. But first, let's talk about what I loved, which is the two main characters, Hadrian and Royce. Amazing. Incredible. I love their friendship. I love them. The people that they encounter are all such fun personalities and characters to meet and to follow. Like, I love Michael J. Sullivan's character work in these books, and I also love his writing style. It's very easy to follow. It's not dense. It moves at a very quick pace, but you still get a lot of world building and really cool details. I really like his writing style. I also just love the plots. I think that the world and the plots are fun. The situations that they get themselves into are just hilarious. I love the world. It feels very like classic fantasy where we have elves, dwarves, humans, the mythology behind it, the gods, and how the gods interact with their creations and how they created the different races. It's just so interesting. I love it. I love it. The only thing that brought it down, that I'll say, is there were a couple times where there were just egregious info dumps. Like, it was just like a character just spitting out to you for 2 pages the background of the world or the mythology or whatever it is. And it was just like, okay, like, these are really info dumpy. Like, there were definitely a few of those throughout both books in this bind up, where I was like, I think we could have learned about this in a little bit more of an organic way. That being said, it was still such a good time. I loved it. I'm so excited to continue on with this series. It seems like each of these stories, they're connected for sure. You have to read them in order, but they each have kind of a different quest in them. Like, they feel like a complete story, which is really nice. So great job, Jess. This is fantastic. I can totally see why you are obsessed with Hadrian and Royce. I am now obsessed with them as well. I'm so glad I liked this. All right, let's talk about Empire of Silence by Christopher Rocchio and the fact that I DNF'd this book. I'm so sorry. I DNF'd it. I was about 50% of the way through, and I said no. So, okay, here's the thing. This is not a bad book. I was not disliking it, but the problem is it's very long and very dense. It's very dense, and I wasn't liking it. And I could just tell that I wasn't going to love it. I could tell that if I had finished it, it probably would have been 3 stars, which is not a bad rating. 3 stars is average. That's fine. I didn't dislike it. I didn't love it, but it was fine. I didn't want to read a just fine book. So I DNF'd it because I knew that it was probably just going to be 3 stars. I'm sorry, Alex. I know that both Alex and Leanna love this book, and I can see why. I've heard that it's very similar to Name of the Wind in the way it's told, where you have a character who is older. I'm not sure how old he is, but he's narrating his life back to you. He's telling you his life story. And the way it's written is beautiful, and you can tell it's really well written. However, I didn't love the main character, and I think that, you know, you're so intimately following him. Like, that's all you've got in these books is Hadrian. So I just knew it didn't have anything that I love about fantasy or sci-fi books. I didn't necessarily love the world building. I can appreciate that it was going somewhere interesting and it seemed very complex and well realized. I just didn't personally care for it. I didn't love the main character or any of the side characters because I just didn't feel like I had enough time with the side characters to really feel anything for them. And the main character of Hadrian, I'm sure that, you know, as you follow his journey, you grow to like him more and more, but I just didn't really care to do that. And the writing style itself, I can see, I can recognize that it's really well told. It's just not a writing style that I personally love. It's really dense, and I just wasn't connecting to it. And now I'm really nervous to read Name of the Wind because I've heard it's similar to Name of the Wind. So if you like Name of the Wind, you might love this. It just wasn't for me. On to the next one. Let's chat about The Lies of Locke Lamora by Scott Lynch. This one had me so conflicted by the end. There were times where I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. I love this so much. And then there were times where I was like eyes glazed over. I was not enjoying it at all and was like, do I even want to finish it? What really tipped it over the edge for me though, and eventually kind of dictated the rating of this book, was the ending. The ending was so fantastic. I feel like everybody kind of knows the general gist of The Lies of Locke Lamora. It follows this guy named Locke Lamora, who's an orphan, who gets taken in by this group and learns to become a thief. And you have this group of thieves who are some of the best in this city, and you're following them as they get pulled into this bigger plot and have to find their way out of it. It definitely feels like a heist story. The low of this book, and what I really didn't enjoy, was the writing style. I did not think that I was a picky reader with my writing styles before this challenge. Like, I thought I could kind of go into any book and just assume that I wouldn't really care about the writing style of it. And what I'm learning about myself is that I'm pretty picky. The writing style of this one, there were moments where it was brilliant. Like, the dialogue was fantastic in this book, but the world building and these dense descriptions of stuff that I just didn't care about. There were so many times where I just could not concentrate on the book. There were these long passages of dense descriptions, and I was like, oh my God, I just didn't care, and was like, oh my God, I'm so bored. But then we would get to a scene with dialogue between characters and character interactions, and I'd be like, oh my God, this is amazing. What was so fantastic? 100% characters. The character of Locke Lamora and his little group, so fantastic. And the ending was just fantastic. There was one part that I thought was a little bit predictable that I was like, okay, I totally saw that coming. So there was so much that I was like, oh my God, this is brilliant. But for a lot of the book, I was not having a good time. So I was so conflicted by the end. And then I think what kind of pushed it to eventually get a rating of 4 stars from me was the ending. The last 150 pages of this book was so good that eventually all of my complaints I kind of had forgotten about and was like, oh my God, this is great. So that being said, I'm probably not going to continue in this series, at least not anytime soon. And I think a big part of it, I know that the next book follows characters on a ship as they're journeying through the sea. And I really don't like those kinds of stories. I really don't like seafaring adventures. I really don't like them. So that just does not appeal to me at all. In this book, the way it's told, it feels like I got a complete story where all of the characters kind of end in a place where you're like, okay, yeah, I'm satisfied. So I feel like this book, it really can stand on its own, where I don't have to read the sequel in order to get all of these answers that I just have to know. It doesn't raise a lot of questions that it then doesn't answer. So for that reason, I feel good with just reading this one book and enjoying it, and I'd probably enjoy it even more upon reread. But I don't feel like I have to continue on with the series, and because I don't love the writing style, I don't know that I have much interest in continuing on with the series. I can see why Leanna recommended it to me, because again, the things that it did well, it did so well. that is my thoughts on Lies of Locke and Lamora. But let's keep reading and see how I like the rest of these books. Now let's talk about The Book Thief by Marcus Zusak. Oh my god, I feel like I'm going to repeat myself a lot with my review of Lies of Locke and Lamora because I had a very similar experience with The Book Thief, where this had such moments of brilliance, but my overall reading experience wasn't my favorite because of writing style. Like, what is it with me and writing styles? I did not think I was this picky, and I guess I am. This book is gorgeously told. It's from the perspective of death as your narrator, which is an amazing concept that I really was interested to see how it was going to be executed. And it takes place during World War II, so it's very much a historical fiction centering on that time frame. And you're following a girl named Liesel who lives with a foster family in this town in Germany, and you're kind of seeing her and the people around her go through the experience of living through World War II in Germany. This book in particular, I know, is so beloved. And again, the way it's told, it's written in a style that's very poetic. Like, it could be just a book of poetry. And the way it's told, it has these very short chapters, and they're kind of interrupted. Like, each chapter is interrupted with these kind of like little anecdotes. And I can see what the author was trying to do. I just didn't love it. And again, like, I can recognize that this writing is gorgeous and is going to work for so many people, but I don't love poetic writing. Like, it doesn't totally work for me. I never really like emotionally connected to them as strongly as I think I was supposed to. So the overall reading experience for me with this book was not my favorite. However, once again, like the previous book, like Lies of Locke and Lamora, the ending was so beautiful. And the writing style, while it didn't work for me for the majority of the book, the way it was written at the very end, I finally appreciated why it was written in this way. It's such a mixed bag because, like, the majority of the time I was reading this, I thought it was going to be like 3.5 stars maybe, but then the ending really pushed it up to 4. So now I'm in a predicament like Lies of Locke and Lamora, where I'm like, did I love this book? No, but I loved the ending. I don't know. And like, I loved Liesel as a character, and some of the side characters I really enjoyed. So now, where to put this one in relation to Lies of Locke and Lamora? Which one did I enjoy more? Like, I get why this is so beloved. It's just a subjective, personal preference of writing style, and this one just not being my favorite. I'm very basic. I just want like a very straightforward story. So just, yeah, I guess I'm just really picky with writing styles, and I didn't know I was until now. We have 3 more books to read, so I'm gonna go ahead and get reading, and I will check back in with you when I have another book to review. Okay, I just finished The Bone Shard Daughter by Andrea Stewart, and I loved it. I feel like I'm learning a lot about myself as a reader through this challenge, which is really cool. I've just figured out that this is my kind of fantasy book. Magic systems that are super cool and unique, world building that's really unique, and animal companions, like cute animal companions, are the best. And I love multi-POV stories. And the writing style, easy to follow, straightforward. What was so good about this book, on top of everything else I just said, was how Andrea Stewart as an author, I can't believe this is her first novel, first of all, the incredible debut, but how she really just kind of threw you in. At the beginning, I was really confused. I remember reading the first 100 pages and not knowing what in the world was going on. She does not give you any sort of exposition or kind of like info dumps to explain to you the world or the magic. Like, you are following characters that already know how the magic works, that already have lived in this world and just are moving through it, and you kind of have to figure it out. She really doesn't handhold you through the story, and I really appreciated that, because even though I was confused kind of at the beginning, when everything starts to fall together and make sense and you get oriented to the world, you feel like so much more connected to the characters, and you just feel like accomplished for like figuring it out. And I loved the mystery aspect of this book. There was a lot of questions that the reader had throughout the entire book, where you're waiting to see how certain perspectives connect to others and what in the world is going on. There's all these secrets that some of the characters have and you're not sure what they are, and how it all comes together at the end is so good. So 5 stars, 5 stars. Because this is why I love fantasy. It's so much fun. I can't wait to read the sequel. This is such a cool world, such a cool magic system. Oh my good. And Meffy, if you know, you know. Meffy is so cute. I just can't say enough good things. So, Elle, you nailed it. Good job. Good job. Thank you for making me read this. All right, 2 more books. So we're just gonna keep on powering through this challenge, and I'll check back in with you when I have another book to talk about. Okay. So I am back to not knowing what my reading taste is. If you had told me that this was military historical fantasy with slight magical elements, but mostly it was following soldiers with boots on the ground during a war, I would have said, I don't know if I'd like that. Doesn't sound like something I'd love. I loved this. I loved this book. This was incredible. I will say it took me a little bit to get into it. It took probably about 100 pages for me to like feel fully invested in this. But once I did feel fully invested, I was in it. I love the main character so much. Emily is like one of my favorite protagonists ever. I loved her. She was brave, confident, strong, independent. I loved her. I want to be Emily. She was amazing. The military aspect of it was fascinating. I loved it. The battles and the fight scenes, I could like see really well. Like the way Adrian Tchaikovsky wrote those scenes, it was so easy to follow, so easy to visualize. And I am not a super visual reader, but like I could see some of those scenes. This was incredible. I'm in shock. I never thought I would love this as much as I did. Alan hit the nail on the head. And the fact that this is a standalone, I thought it being a standalone would be such a bummer, because sometimes, you know, you want more of the characters in the world and all of that. And while, yes, it would be great if I could get more books with Emily, this was such a good story from start to finish and had such an amazing ending that I wouldn't want a sequel to mess it up. Like, this was perfect as a standalone. And the way it ended was so good. It was so good. It was so one of my favorite endings, I gotta say. And oh man, the way it was described, either Alan or Leanna said it was kind of like Jane Austen in a military fantasy novel. And like, that is so spot on. The parallels you could draw to some of Jane Austen's works, like the romance in this felt very Pride and Prejudice. I would never have read this if it wasn't for this video and for Alan, and that thought makes me so sad, because I would have missed out on this. Oh, this was amazing. Obviously, I gave it 5 stars. I mean, if that wasn't clear already. This might go down as one of my favorite fantasy books of all time. So yeah, loved the writing, loved the plot, loved the characters, everything about it. And it had like hardly any magic. It had hardly any kind of fantastical elements. There was no sort of unique world building going on. So everything that like I loved about the Bone Shard Daughter, like all of that was missing in this. But I still loved this. So I'm back to not knowing what I like in fantasy. I guess I like military fantasy, military historical fantasy, I guess, because this was amazing. I loved this. This was like 100%. I was invested from start to finish. So that's Guns at the Dawn. Great job, Alan. Great job. I'm so glad that you picked this book for me. It was not what I was expecting you to pick for me, but I'm so glad that this was the one you picked. So that is Guns at the Dawn. We only have one more book to go. And this is really ending on a very strong note. So let's find out what I think of Age of Myth. I did it! I finished the last book, Age of Myth by Michael J. Sullivan, and I am so happy to report this challenge ended on such a high with this book. Oh my goodness. I loved this. I loved this. I'm so excited that I loved it. And I figured I would. The way Joshana talked about it, it always sounded like something I would enjoy. This is kind of the prequel series to the Rhyria Revelations series that I started as a part of this challenge as well. So we are in the same world as Theft of Swords, but it's thousands of years prior to the events that take place in that series. And it has a very, very different tone and feel, where it feels much more classic epic fantasy. It takes on a much more serious tone, and I loved that because I do still love that classic epic fantasy feel. But what I loved so much about this book in particular was the female characters. The women in this book were so well written. I loved every single one of them. Persephone, Suri, even all of Persephone's friends that she had, all of them were so well developed, and I loved them. I loved their dynamic. I just loved how strong they all were. It was so interesting because I feel like the male characters didn't really stand out to me, really at all. They very much felt like they took a backseat to the women in the story, which is not what I was expecting. And I loved it. I loved it. It was amazing. And I know Michael J. Sullivan can write amazing male characters because he wrote Royce and Hadrian, and they're amazing. I loved them. But there weren't any male characters in this book that I loved. I did feel like this took a while to get into, which is why I don't think I'm going to rate it 5 stars. It did feel like for a majority of the book, it was very much like a prologue to the rest of the story. However, by like 60-70% of the way in, I was completely hooked, and by the end, the ending was so good. There was this twisty twist. I ended up just feeling so invested in the characters, so in love with this world, and I can't wait to see where it goes. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to take Joshana's recommendation and finish this series before I continue on in the Rhyria Revelation series, because I don't want to be spoiled for anything that happens in these books. I'm so invested in these characters that I just want to be completely surprised. I don't want to know any of the direction it's going to go. I did recognize a couple of places that were referenced in Theft of Swords were referenced in this book, so I noticed those Easter eggs, but I think I'm going to appreciate it so much more reading this series first, knowing the real history of the world, and then seeing those Easter eggs throughout the rest of the books in this world, rather than the opposite. I feel like I want to read this series first. So I'm really excited. I'm so happy that I loved it. I really like Michael J. Sullivan's writing. It's very easy to get into. It's very easy to just fly through the pages. And I just really, at the end of the day, I do love like that classic epic fantasy feel. This has elves, humans, dwarves, and it just feels very classic, yet offers up something fresh with its characters. Yay! I'm so happy that I ended the challenge on such a positive note. This was fantastic. So now it's time to try to wrap up this challenge and try to rank all of the books that I read. Let's take a look at the rankings that I predicted for this challenge, and I definitely got it wrong. The rankings were way off, basically. I don't know my taste at all. What I've learned through this challenge is I have no idea what I like in fantasy, and that I'm much more picky with writing style than I realized. So here is what I think is my actual ranking now. Obviously, Empire of Silence is going to go at the bottom because I DNF'd it. I'm sorry. I know everyone loves this series, so I don't know why, again, I didn't connect with it. I think it had to do with writing style and characters. Just wasn't connecting to. The book in 6th place, I'm going to say, is The Book Thief. That one, being historical fiction, is not a genre I tend to love. And the way it was written for the majority of the book, I didn't love the writing style. It's a little too poetic for my taste, but the ending was great. So I'm gonna say The Book Thief is in 6th place. In 5th place, I'm going to say The Lies of Locke Lamora. Because again, I think the writing style really hampered my enjoyment of that book. And while there were such brilliant moments, my overall reading experience wasn't as positive as some of these other books. So I'm glad I read that one, but don't love the writing style, but I do love some of the moments and characters. In 4th place, I think I'm going, this is where it gets hard because all of the rest of these books were 4.5 stars and above. So I'm going to say in 4th place, do I say Age of Myth or Theft of Swords? I don't know which one I liked more. This is really hard. I think I'm gonna say Age of Myth in 4th because it did have a slower build-up. It took me a little bit longer to feel invested, even though I still loved it. I did love it, I really did, but I feel like with Theft of Swords, I was invested quicker. Theft of Swords will be 3rd. And then the last 2 books were both 5 stars. So this is really hard because which 5-star did I like more? Here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna say in 2nd place is The Bone Shard Daughter, because while that series has the potential to be an all-time favorite, I think right now, like even though it's 5 stars, I wouldn't call just the first book an all-time favorite because there's still a lot left to discover about this world and what's happening. So even though I loved the first book and I see the potential there for it to be an all-time favorite, there's still a lot left of that series to discover. So in 2nd place is The Bone Shard Daughter, which means the winner of this challenge is Alan with Guns of the Dawn by Adrian Tchaikovsky. That one definitely takes 1st place. I loved that book. It was a standalone, which means I got a complete story, and I am so happy that it's a standalone because that ending was so perfect. I loved the main character of Emily so much in this book. The romance in it, I adored. I loved just the feel of like Jane Austen meets military fantasy. I thought it was amazing. I loved everything about that book. So that's got to take 1st place. This was so much fun to do. I would love to do this again. Thank you to all my friends for participating, and thank you to you all for watching this video. What did you think of this challenge? Do you agree with my rankings? Have you read any of these books? What did you think of them? Let me know those comments down below. Would you like to see something like this again? Definitely let me know that too. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you'd like to, and I will see you all in my next one. Bye.